Hello, it's Karen at the Cool Tool Studio. Today I'm going to be demonstrating a method for creating a metal clay chain in this chain link earrings project video. Today I'm going to be demonstrating how to make a metal clay chain, and my finished project is a pair of earrings. I think they're really cute. I like that they've got double-sided and can be viewed from all directions, but I will say that they are a little bit heavy, weighing in at 6 grams. If you like this technique and want to give it a try, but that sounds a little heavy for you for earrings, you could use this technique to make a beautiful bracelet or necklace as well. That being said, let's get started and take a look at the tools you're going to need to make a metal clay chain. For the clay working portion of this project, I'm going to be working with a clay board, a clay perforating needle tool, some Royal soft grip brushes, both large and small, an extra firm clay shaper, a scalpel, some diamond needle files, some sanding pads, clay thickness rolling frames, Asian Design Set 2 of Wanaree Tanner's texture plates, Easy 960 sterling clay, some tough cards, a hot plate, a wick away, a wonder roller, and some cool slip. I'm going to start off by prepping both my work surface and my clay roller with some cool slip. And then I'm going to be rolling my clay to 3 cards thickness and then texturing down to 2 cards. And I'm working that thinly because these pieces are going to be doubled up, and you're also making earrings, so you want to keep it as lightweight as possible. So I'm kind of rolling a longer strip because I'm going to see how many segments I can get to texture in one go. So I'm going to be working with this chain link shape on this lovely Asian Design Set 2 texture plate, and that's about 3 fingers width. So I'm coming over here, seeing that's about 3, mark, it's about 3, and it looks like, well, this might stretch. We'll see how we do. So I'm going to cut to about those 3 strips. This guy might not be enough, but it doesn't hurt to try. Move them off to the side. And then there's still plenty of cool slip on my work surface here. I'm going to use one of my brushes to kind of pick it up and apply it to this texture plate. And then I love these texture plates. They have the nice supports on either side. You can rest your rolling frames on, keep things from scooting around. I'm going to lay down my clay. I'm actually going to scoot this a little to the side. And then we're going to roll down to apply the texture. Whoop. And I should have actually applied some cool slip further out there. Had a little bit of sticking. That should come off. So I'm going to set this off to the side. You always learn your lessons in metal clay pretty quickly. Next time, brush my cool slip a little further out, because you know, you're sitting there thinking, I'm making this element, this is where I need to apply my cool slip, but then since you're texturing down, the clay is going to expand beyond your border there. So I'm actually going to take the time to clean this properly, and then we'll pick back up. So we're back, lesson learned. I'm going to be a little more liberal with the cool slip this time, picking it up with a brush and working it in past just what I'm trying to make. That way, as my clay expands when I'm texturing down, it'll still peel up further out. So I'm going to grab my other one, lay it down, and roll to apply the texture. Alright, much better this time. Whoop. And then, I don't know, they're growing a lot, so this guy might just make it. We'll see. And for these earrings, since they are double-sided, nope, not even close. Well, it was worth a shot. But as I was saying, for these earrings, since they are double-sided and they're 3 links each, I ended up making 6 links per earring. So 12 of these little link shapes total. It's kind of repetitive work, but it's nice if you're just kind of wanting to relax and practice some skills. And I think the finished project is really cute. I always like to cut out the inside of my shapes first. I feel like I'm just less likely to distort the shape when I do that. Peel away my excess. Got a little wonky here. Take the time to clean that up. And then I'm going to cut my outside border. These Wanaree texture plates that have the indented lines for you to cut are really nice. Just kind of give you some guidance. Don't want to block your view there. Alright, so there's one. I'm going to cut out my other. So I found that I have best luck lining up these chain links nicely when I allow them to thoroughly dry, and then kind of file and sand and refine the edges prior to lining them up. I find that when I line them up and then try to sand the edges and stuff, some of them, like you can already kind of tell on this link, you know, I cut a little wide here, I cut a little narrow here, and then if I were to line these two up, I'd have to take in this side a lot to kind of meet this thinner edge, and it's just a lot easier to clean them up first and then attach them to each other. So we're gonna allow these to dry, and then we're gonna sand and shape them. So while those ones were drying, I went ahead and repeated that process 2 more times to make 6 links in total. So again, these are gonna get attached together before becoming the chain links. So for this whole project, you need 12. But today I'm just going to be walking you through one set of the earrings. So again, I like to start off by shaping before joining them. And I really love using these little mini diamond needle files for getting interior shapes. As you can see, there's some edge there that I could spend some time cleaning up. I'm going to be using this round, half round file, because that rounded edge is going to work nicely with this rounded profile here. And as I'm sanding this inside shape, I'm going to be supporting it. I'm not just holding it out here and sanding. I'm going to do my best to lessen my chance of having anything break, and I'm going to do so by supporting my work. I like to do my sanding and refining over these black tough cards. It makes it really easy to reclaim all of your sandings and reconstitute them. So again, I've kind of got this outside here, this outside finger here to support, and I'm just going to file that edge. It can also be helpful to turn your work this way and support on the desk. Come down low so you can see what you're up to, and you can sand that inside edge this way as well. It's all kind of a matter of preference. I almost find that just kind of running it side to side and using it more as a scraping tool is helpful for this kind of shape. Because if you sit there and go up and down, and then move up and down, you can kind of create some grooves, and we're trying to even the surface out. So I'm happy with that. Now I'm ready to move on to sanding. I love these sanding pads because you can cut them to any size you want, so they can be trimmed to be nice and small and fit inside. And then I also like to kind of cut off the edge there to kind of thin it out, because if I were to come in with this way, it fits a little more tightly, so having the extra room and clearance and the freedom that that allows is really nice. So again, I'm supporting from underneath, and I'm sanding that edge. Started out with super fine, do ultra fine, and you don't really have to go all the way to microfine or anything, because we are going to be finishing these again quickly once they've been joined, but it's helpful to clean up the surface and get a nice edge before you do so. Now I'm just going to use the sanding pads for this outer edge. And just remove any excess material, clean up any lines, and get these links as perfect as possible. I find it's helpful to have a brush handy to dust it off, and kind of see how you're doing. Got a thick spot there still that I'm going to take down some. All right. So that looks pretty good, and I'm going to repeat that process to all of my links so I can get a sense of who's going to be the best matches. All right, so I'm just wrapping up with this last link here. And as I previously said, you don't have to go to ultrafine. If you feel like you can see pretty clearly that edge, then you can leave it at that, because we are going to be refining these again once they're connected. We were just kind of establishing the shape so we can see which links fit together best. Dust my hands some really quickly. All right, so you can already kind of tell that this guy's a little wide. This one kind of looks a little narrow, so I don't think they would be friends, but these two look pretty similar. So I'm going to line them up. And that looks pretty good. So again, these guys look sort of similar. So we'll see if they'll play nicely. Looks pretty good too. So then that leaves these guys. All right, so I'm going to be joining these with water, but before I do so, I'm going to remove my sanding material to save for later. I just feel like when there's kind of that dust around, it's pretty easy for it to drift onto your piece after you've made it damp and kind of lose the crispness of your patterns. So we're going to clean up our workspace quickly. Keep things as clean as possible and save as much of this precious silver as we can. So now I'm going to be bringing in my wick away. And then I've got that extra firm clay shaper. I'm working with the cup round shape at this point as well. So I'm going to start off by dampening all of the units, just kind of giving the moisture some time to soak in. And actually it looks like there's a little bit of extra clay there. That's going to keep my pieces from joining as well as they could. So I'm going to take that down super quickly. There we go. Again, coming back to save that. And I've got a brush, picking up some water. And I'm just kind of pre-moistening everyone, giving the water some time to soak into that surface. Alright, finishing up here. And then by the time you're about done with that one, this guy's drying out a little bit. So I'm going to add a little more moisture. And then I'm just going to be joining these with water and pressure. So you've got a little bit of time that you can kind of fuss with things. Flip it over, check from this side. It's looking pretty good. And then you can either do this in the air or use your work surface to support. I'm going to apply some downward pressure. It's going to hold for a couple of seconds, kind of rotate, press down at the points. When you feel like everyone's nice and well adhered, I'm going to take this off to the hot plate to allow it to dry. All right. So again, chains, there's lots of links, there's a good deal of repetition, so I'm just going to repeat that process for these 4 components to make my last 2 links. So these have been joined and they're dry, and there's 2 different ways that you can go about refining them. If you look at your edge, you can kind of still see the seam there, and clay shapers are really nice because you don't remove material using the clay shaper. You dampen the clay and then you kind of get to relocate it. Whereas if you're using sanding pads or filing, you're doing a reductive process there and you're getting rid of material. So instead of just removing material and then having to come in and fill, I'm going to be using the clay shaper. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of water on my clay shaper, and then again, kind of supporting my work, I'm going to massage the water in and work in small circular motions. And as you can see, I'm filling the seam and kind of taking down any high areas all in one go. So this is a really nice way to kind of refine any joints or places where edges meet. I will say that Easy 960 doesn't have the best surface when it's been finished with just wet refining, so I wouldn't consider this a final finish. Once my links have been joined and everything's all said and done, I am going to come back with the microfine, most fine sanding pad that I have and give this edge a final finish. But for now, we're just making that seam invisible. So again, if I had like a big glaring kind of edge that was sticking out some, I would go ahead and take that down with a file or a sanding pad. But if your seam's close and you're just kind of, evening up something minor, this is a great method. I really like this cup round shape because it's really good for being able to fit into this corner when you're working on the inside. So I'm going to go ahead and do some wet refining on both the inside and outside edges of this piece. And then we're going to join the links. So these are dry, and when I join them, I'm going to be just cutting one of my links open. So it's easier to clean up the flat faces when the pieces aren't joined. So I'm just going to really quickly take my microfine sanding pad and do any last minute refinement that I may need. I had earlier mentioned that Easy 960 doesn't have the best surface when you finish with wet refining. So I'm just going to really quickly go around my exterior and interior edges as well. So there's going to be one point that I'm going to be cutting, and you might have to do a little bit of refinement there and revisit it. But overall, it's just easier to finish these pieces before they're joined. So again, don't forget your pieces are two-sided. You clean up the front and the back. And this is just going to make your life easier. Once the pieces are fired, it's going to be super easy to bring them up to a nice finish. All right. So again, now that I'm ready to join, I don't want any dust around. I don't really think there's any on there, but never hurts to brush off any excess. And I'm going to pick a spot on the top of one of my links, because when these links are joined, it's going to be easiest to hide the seam on the top, because that's going to have this piece here covering it. If I were to do it on the side here, that's going to be exposed. So I'm using a scalpel, because if I were to use a saw blade, I'd be removing a tiny bit of material, and I'm just cutting straight down. So now I'm going to open that link by pulling up and down. I'm using Easy 960 for this project because it is pretty flexible when dried, and I'm not too worried about breaking my clay. So I've got to put the bottom link on, and then the top link, I'm going to close it, bring in another tough card, and I've got my brush here for my wick away. So I'm getting the moisture down into that seam, and then it's going to kind of just want to pop shut and close on itself, and that's perfect. I'm going to give it a little bit of pressure with my fingers and just kind of hold it there for a couple of moments. And once you take your fingers away, if it doesn't spring open, you know it's good to go. And that looks pretty good. Again, Easy 960 joins very well with just water. I've made tons and tons of chains using Easy 960 where all I do is use water. So I feel pretty confident in this connection. I'm going to allow it to dry, and then you really shouldn't have too much cleanup. I'll probably just hit it with a microfine sanding pad, and then we'll be ready to fire these. So my connection is dry, and you can kind of see the inside there, a little bit of a line, but it's not the most visible. But again, just since there's water there, I'm going to quickly hit it with a microfine sanding pad. Once you're happy with your earring and you've made its pair, you're ready to fire. I like to fire these pieces with support in a dish using either alumina hydrate or vermiculite. If you're using alumina hydrate, don't forget to wear a mask. When you're firing these pieces, you don't have to worry about the silver fusing together. They can lay on top of each other like this and not fuse. If they were damp, then you'd have a different story, but they're not going to fuse in the firing process. Fire these pieces at 1675 for 2 hours. Here's what you're going to need to solder on your earring posts. I have an annealing pan that has a 3rd arm attachment, a honeycomb brick, a regular soldering brick, the earring posts, and then some solder chips. Cool Tools sells solder that's pre-cut and it's super convenient and ready to use. Since I'm only doing one seam today, I'm going to be working with Easy Solder. I also have some flux and a brush to apply my flux and a butane torch. So my pieces have fired, and just really quickly before we solder, this is the length that I cut open, and I'm not even sure where my seam was. There's one side, here's the other, and like I said, it looks really good. So we're ready to solder. And if you'll notice, I actually tumble my pieces before I solder them. Not only is it nice to close up that surface so it doesn't soak solder, I also think it helps your piece not be prone to absorbing any pickle or anything like that. So I think you have best results when you tumble your pieces prior to soldering them. Alright, so I'm going to be applying some flux to both my earring post and my earrings themselves, and that's just going to reduce the buildup of oxides. So my flux is applied to both my earring post and my earring itself, and I'm going to pick up some solder. I kind of usually preheat it until I see it falling some, and then I come in with my post and just tap it, and then I heat my post some so it jumps onto my post, because solder follows heat. So I use more solder when I'm soldering metal clay than if I'm soldering on a machined or milled metal, so I'm going to pick up 2 or 3 pieces this method. Alright, so that is nice and charged with solder. So now I'm going to be attaching the 3rd hand to the side here, and I'm going to set everything for soldering. I'm going to bring this down, and this can be kind of finicky. It's kind of difficult since this chain link doesn't want to lay flat. Might have to do some kind of angling. And I'm just shooting for kind of the top of that, not quite at the point, but the top portion of my link there. And you just want to make sure you have good surface contact. If this is floating above and there's no pressure, then the solder is not going to flow. It's just going to jump from one piece to the other, and it's not going to make a strong connection. So before I start up my torch, I'm going to take a moment to talk about how this is going to work. Since I've already preheated this top piece and it's got a little residual heat, I'm going to be focusing most of my heat on the body of the earring here. Solder flows and joins pieces when both pieces are the same temperature. So since this is also volumetrically much larger, we're going to have to focus our heat there. That being said, I'm not going to completely ignore my earring post, but I'm going to spend a good amount of time preheating this earring. I'm actually going to kind of tap down and put some pressure on this third arm. And looking for the flow, there she goes. So third arms make soldering really approachable because they allow you to prepare everything and just really focus on applying the heat. So once my solder flashed, I'm just going to open it up there, release it, and then I always like to, before I run off and reset everything, pick it up by the post. Make sure he's soldered on there. And he is good to go. So I'm going to place this piece into a pickle. That's just going to remove any flux residue. To finish these pieces up, I'm going to be applying some black wax with a disposable applicator and then removing it from the high areas using this yellow 400 grit sanding block. I like using black wax on a project like this because I don't want the black on the inside edge there, and if I were just dipping into liver of sulfur, then I'd have to sand it and remove it from the areas where I don't want it. This is much more specific in how I'm able to apply it. Do make sure that you're working in a well-ventilated area and wearing gloves. Also, don't forget about your eye protection. So I've got some black wax on my applicator here, and I'm just really quickly running it over that surface there. And you can see a little bit goes a long way. And I am going to have to do a little bit of kind of scooting around. And right there, I just got on the inside, so I'm going to have to sand that anyway some. But the least sanding I can do, the happier I am. It takes a lot of time. So then, again, these pieces are double-sided. So I'm going to kind of flip it over. And apply it to the side as well. Still working off just that first dip. A little bit goes a long way. I'm also using black wax today because I just like the really nice flat black that it gives. I'm not going to be tumbling these after I sand them. I kind of like the matte black and the softer finish. Alright, time for a little bit more. But I'm just gonna go along here and apply my black wax, and then we'll really quickly go over sanding. So once you've applied your black wax, I really like these sanding blocks for just really quickly removing it from the high areas and showing off that contrast in the pattern. And I did get it on some of my edges, so I'm going to clean those up. And flip. And again, I think there's a lot of work to make these earrings two-sided, and whether they're earrings or ends up being a necklace chain, whatever project you do end up completing, I just think that two-sidedness is worth it. They're beautiful from every angle. And I'm just really happy with that surface. Again, you could tumble this or bring it up to a more higher polish, but I just think that the kind of matte black and the soft finish is really beautiful with this pattern. I'm going to keep sanding these until I'm happy with the finished surface. My earrings are finished and I'm really happy with this surface. I think the matte black looks really great with the satin finish on the silver, and the pattern's really popping. I love that these earrings are beautiful no matter which direction they're viewed from. Using an element from a texture tile to create a chain link is a really simple way to add a lot of visual interest to your chains. I hope this video showed you just how simple creating a chain can be and that you give it a shot. Thanks for watching.